For the first time in the history of the African Union, the opening session of the OAU summit did not commence with applause or protocol. It began with silence. At the center of the Grand Hall in Addis Ababa, Captain Ibrahim Traore, President of the Transitional Government of Burkina Faso, held a single sheet of paper. Not a speech, but a list. A list of names no one wanted to hear. Victims of civil unrest, students gunned down at protest gates, mothers who lost children to senseless violence. As eyes turned to him, he raised his head and spoke a single sentence. Let us begin not with words, but with silence. Then he paused 1 minute, then 2. By the third, silence had enveloped the room like a mist. 24 heads of state, hundreds of diplomats, global cameras all suspended in stillness. No interpretation, no scripted preamble, only the weight of memory. Why would a president shatter diplomatic tradition with silence? What was he urging the continent to recall? Stay with us, for this is not just a story. It is the future our ancestors envisioned. Subscribe, not just for a video, but for a risen Africa. The hall, carved from glass and steel, gleamed under the midday sun of Addis Ababa. Delegations arrived. From across the continent, presidents in tailored suits, ministers with portfolios stacked high, advisors whispering into translation earpieces. The African Union flag hung above, flanked by the gold and green banners of 24 nations. This was a day meant for statements, alliances, and memoranda. Yet everything shifted when Captain Traore stepped to the podium. No fanfare announced him, no overture played. Dressed in a simple gray tunic, the president of Burkina Faso moved with quiet resolve. Behind him, an aide carried only a folded piece of paper. When the microphone clicked on, Traore spoke 7 words. Let us begin not with words, but with silence. At first, there was confusion. Technicians thought it was a glitch. Interpreters froze, but Traore stood still, eyes closed. Then, with a faint motion, he unfolded the paper and began to read. Samuel Umar, 19, shot outside Nairobi University. Fatuma Traore, 34, vanished near the Mapi border. Daniel Menda, 11, burned in a village raid. Isatu Kanti, 12, died crossing the desert. Mahmoud Diarra, 70, perished waiting for food aid. The list continued, name after name, from Kenya, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad. Young, old, male, female, forgotten, silenced. For each name, a pause. For each pause, a breath. The hall transformed. President William Ruto of Kenya leaned forward, hands clasped. Rwanda's Paul Kagame removed his glasses, eyes glistening. South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa shook his head softly. No whispers now, no rustling. Even the photographer's shutters fell silent. Silence became sacred. Behind Traore, the screen displayed no logos or maps, only candles, one for each name read. As he finished, Traore looked at no one in particular, and stepped back. 7 minutes had passed, interrupted only by names. No one spoke until Ghana's president, Nana Akufo-Addo, broke the hush with a whisper. He reminded us why we are here. The moderator tried to resume the schedule, but something had fractured. The room no longer belonged to formality, it belonged to remembrance. Why did this moment matter? Never before had an African summit opened with mourning. Never had the names of the dead taken precedence over the voices of the powerful. Traore wasn't just addressing his peers, he was gently, resolutely indicting them. How often have African leaders spoken of progress while ignoring its cost in blood? How many lives have been reduced to civilian casualties, never named again? In the quiet, a truth emerged. This continent has been speaking, but not heard until now. In that moment, it wasn't Burkina Faso speaking. It was history, memory, and a quiet but undeniable demand. Never forget them again. It began with a video, not broadcast on television, but passed hand to hand, phone to phone, filmed by a student. Her voice trembled as she captured what no one else would. The gates of Nairobi University, morning light fractured by tear gas, riot police in dark helmets. There, in the chaos, a boy in a red jumper and worn-out sneakers, backpack strapped tight, eyes darting. Samuel Umar, 19. He wasn't shouting or throwing stones, he was running. In that grainy footage, you see it clearly. He looks back once. A glance that speaks of fear, confusion, the desperate hope of safety. And he stumbles. A shot rubber or worse. Then another. A crowd screams. The video cuts. In Kenya. That video became a flashpoint, shared over 2 million times in 24 hours. Samuel Umar lit up timelines, but in the OAU Summit Chamber, it became personal. When Traore reached his name, his voice slowed. The room, already still, felt heavier. Even the translators fell silent. Traore cleared his throat. Samuel Umar, 19, student, Nairobi University, shot while unarmed. The Kenyan delegation showed no outward reaction, but those watching saw it. President Ruto leaned back, jaw tight, eyes fixed beyond the chambers. Ceiling. What can a president do when a boy's name, possibly killed by his police, is spoken with no accusation, only grief? Then, without prelude, Traore drew a second page from his jacket, handwritten, edges creased. His voice softened, fragile. My name is Miriam Wanjiku. I am Samuel Umar's mother. I am not educated, but I write this so you know my son loved books. He dreamed of teaching. He never broke a law. I gave birth to him during the rainy season. He died on dry ground. If this letter reaches someone powerful, please don't let his name vanish like dust. No one moved. Traore read her words, placed the paper beside the microphone, and stepped back. A candle flickered on the screen, unscripted, added by his team. One flame for Samuel. In that moment, something ancient cracked open. This was no longer a summit about economic zones or border commissions. It was about a mother, a boy, and a silence that had lasted too long. What made Traore's voice different? He didn't raise it or dramatize. Yet, in his steadiness, he made it impossible to look away. A journalist later wrote, his eyes carried the weight of a continent. Perhaps because he was not just a president, but a son whose mother once wrote his name with hope. Across the chamber, President Ramaphosa adjusted his glasses repeatedly. Rwanda's foreign minister gripped his hands tightly. Even the stoic Egyptian envoy pressed his lips together, gaze lowered. Samuel's name did what no briefing could. It turned power into people, policy into memory. And Traore needed no statistics, just a letter, just a name. Is this what leadership should be? Not speeches, but witnessing. Not grand visions, but refusing to forget. As Traore stepped down, he left the letter in view. No applause followed, none was needed. That night in Nairobi, over 300 students gathered at the gate where Samuel fell, holding candles and laminated copies of Miriam's letter. They formed a circle of light and silence. No chants, no slogans, just memory. Before the next speaker, a murmur swept the chamber, not from delegates, but from aides, translators, and camera crews. Something had shifted. At the front, where Kenya's cultural envoy was to sit, stood an empty chair, draped with a white cloth. On it, a placard, Samuel Umar. No announcement, no statement, just a chair-turned memorial, a silent plea. Traore nodded toward it. Symbols speak where politics fall. Silent, the lights dimmed. The screens flickered, not with flags, but with a satellite map of Africa. Red markers blinked one by one. Mogadishu, Maradi, Wahuguya, Eldoret, dozens, then hundreds. This is not a threat map, Trayer said. This is a map of silence. Why had no summit shown this before? Why had no president traced grief's geography? Why did these markers align with regions rich in gold, oil, cobalt? Who profits when civilians vanish unmapped? As these questions lingered, the screen faded. New images appeared. A white flag above a Timbuktu school, candles beneath a yawn. Statue, a child's crayon drawing of stick figures holding hands, taped to a bullet-riddled wall in eastern Congo. All real, all recent, all unseen by news. Not all symbols are chosen, Trayer said. Some are born when words fail us. Along the hall, AIDS-placed objects, black cloth across the entrance, a Swahili banner Wenotembea Kimya, those who walk in silence, a glass box with a single school shoe. The camera zoomed in, unprompted. Trayer stepped down into stillness, now with shape. Why do objects speak clearer than ministers? Why do we remember a shoe, but not a slogan? When symbols outshine speeches, what does that say about our politics? Delegate from Senegal crossed the floor, placing a white flower on the empty chair. Then Namibia, then Gabon, one by one, unscripted. This was no performance. It was ritual. 17 delegates laid tributes, more off-camera, as if the chair became a confessional. Across Africa, viewers paused, some wept. Others watched unblinking. On Facebook, the map of red markers was shared 2.8 million times in 24 hours. A Kampala teacher posted, "We taught maps for borders." Trayer gave us maps for grief. A murmur circled the chamber like a prayer. He made us see.